Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Artist Collective podcast. I am here with a very special guest who has been on a panel of ours in the past. And I also give both her mom and her daughter voice lessons.
I'm a sandwich somehow in that equation.
I know. So I feel like at this
Part
point
of the
you're a
family.
friend, you're a confidant, you're also just like an incredible human being, but also somebody who has been with EAC for a bit. And so I'm so grateful that you are here. Without further ado, I'm not going to introduce you myself. I'm going to throw it over your way. Who are you, my dear?
I love this because sometimes I feel like somebody else introducing you is just an ego feed, you know? Like, and I mean that in the psychological sense, and we all have ego and we all need it fed, but you can seek it being overfed when it feels empty, right? And so I think I love that too, because then I can define myself, right?
Exactly.
Like what's important.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, like, you can feed your own ego. Like, please stroke your own ego in this space. Like, tell us all the great things about you. Like, that is what I want to know.
Yeah. But like how our own personality narratives, like how do I introduce myself? What are the parts of myself that are kind of most salient to me? Anyway, I'm Dr. Alisa Hurwitz. I'm a psychologist. Pertinent to this conversation. I also, on the social media platforms, am Dr. Drama, talking about the intersection of psychology and theater. And I am also a mother, a sister, an aunt, a daughter, and a lover of live performance. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Also a lover of animals and dogs. Can we just talk about this for a moment? How
we
met?
Yes. Wait, did we meet through the dogs?
I mean, well, I feel like we didn't meet through the dogs. We met through your lives that were happening over the pandemic.
That's right.
So talk about that, and then we can talk about our conversation that happened from there, because it was lovely.
Yes. I don't know much in this life. I don't know much in this life. I know a few things sort of well. I know psychology. I sort of know theater. And I sort of know dogs, especially rescue pit bulls. We will get to that. During the pandemic, so I've been doing Dr. Drama for going on 5 years, because I had a passion for theater and felt like I had something to offer around conversations related to mental health through that pop culture lens, because I think it's very, very important to destigmatize conversations around mental health. When I say mental health, I mean the entire spectrum, not just mental illness, but including mental illness. And so when I started it, it's evolved into many different things and kind of become what it needs to be. When the pandemic began and we all started being quarantined, and I started working from home remotely for 54 weeks, and I didn't have a commute anymore, and I felt there was, there obviously was a need, right? Mental health need, really bubbling to the surface, and people wanted to have these conversations more. Excuse me. So I started hosting a series on Instagram called Musicals and Mental Health, that was really just conversations about mental health with people in the theater, and it was wonderful and successful in the way that people were very engaged, and were tuning in and were really, participating in these conversations. And so that's how we met. That's how we met. We connected because of that series. And Jennifer was a guest of my series, and we had a wonderful, meaningful conversation.
Which also included our dogs. That's kind of doubling back to where I was like, I'm a lover of dogs, because I brought Walter, my rescue pup. And was it Louis? Was Louis the one who was there? Yeah, I think so. And they just, I mean, we pretended that they understood that they both were on this conversation, but like we both at least knew that they were there.
Yes.
Just very present. It was just like a dog fest in conversation, also about mental health, which was very apropos for 2 rescue dogs in the space with us.
Yeah. That's right. We talked about like the therapeutic power, like legit therapeutic power of dogs. And And Louis made his appearances on the series many
I
times,
love
and
it.
it was wonderful. Yeah.
Louis is such a doll. I mean, honestly, we can make this whole entire episode about dogs. Truly, my heart would be very happy about it. I
Yeah.
know I wonder about the listener being like, but what about cats? What about bunnies? And be like, I
Yes.
have no problem with any of that.
Yeah.
Just
No.
I know dogs quite well. But Louis, oh my God, just a little ball of love. And by
Yes.
little, I mean large.
Yes.
Just
Yes. Let's define little being 50 pounds of muscle. But he's people look at him and think he looks intimidating because he has the stereotypical pit bull type dog features.
yeah.
The muscly cheeks and the thick neck and the kind of more boxy body. And all he is like is a ball of love, goofy love. He
Yeah.
is a goofball. He's a clown. He is such a love that he will start kissing you before he even gets to you. Like his liquor
Oh.
starts going, as he
Oh.
approaches you. And close is not close enough for him. It's very typical, pit bull type dog temperament,
Yeah.
where he's just very attached, very socially motivated,
Yeah.
um, very loving.
Ugh, the best. Dogs are
The
the best.
best.
So if we hear dogs in the background during this episode, y'all just know that they're always welcome in this space.
Yes.
Well, I'm curious, just tell the listener a little bit more about, I guess, the work that you do within your practice, and then perhaps the way in which that has transferred over into the theater land, because I feel like so many of us artists actually know you through that rather than perhaps what you do in your own private practice.
Sure. Yeah. So in my practice, I mean, I'm just Louis is there
Yep.
charming.
There we
He
go.
he
We
must see a
love.
squirrel or something.
Or he's like, I hear you talking about me and I want to be a part of this conversation. Why are you leaving me out?
He's so funny because if he sees an animal outside, he
Yeah.
will bark like heck at them. And those animals know, the animals outside, they know that he can't get to them. It's like double pane glass. But if he ever gets close enough to them, and there's not glass between, he's scared. He's legit scared.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
He's a big baby. Yeah. So my day job, I'm a generalist, but also have specialties in working with the autism population, trauma, and in gender identity, and that those three specialties are all really important to me, especially working with our local trans non-binary gender non-conforming population, because there is such a need for practitioners who actually do specialize in gender identity. And like literally any one less person doing that work in the area is less access for people. Whereas if somebody's depressed, you can see most people, like most clinical psychologists can see depression, can see anxiety, can see grief, even though you can specialize in those areas, but they're all kind of part of being a generalist. And gender identity, actually active harm can be done by people who aren't at least versed in how and the language to use and how to not be causing harm when there's so much trauma and harm caused around interaction with the medical community in the first place. So that work is especially important to me because it is consistent with my values to be part of the solution of social justice and equity. And I think that's one of the equality issues of our time, civil rights issues of our time. And that, you were asking about like how that translated into the theater work.
Yeah. Like, how did you find yourself as, you're on panels all over the place, and obviously people know you in the community as, Dr. Drama, like on Instagram, but generally like, oh yes, this, licensed professional is like in our world, moving around and doing what they do. So how have you found, like, how was that transition into the community? How was that made? And then also how is the work that you do, I guess, private practice informed and vice versa?
Yeah. It really started with the kind of a moment of inspiration. It really just was kind of an epiphany that I had to do that, to, just bring your professional knowledge to your passion. And sometimes people will ask, newer professionals or aspiring professionals, how did you get this job, meaning Dr. Drama?
Yeah.
And I made 2 points about that. One is that I made it up myself. I made it up myself, and anybody can do that. I had the bandwidth and the passion for it, so I just created it myself. Number one. Number two, it's not really a job. I do sometimes do things that I get paid for, but most of what I do is an offering. I believe in this idea that you have to give it away to keep it. If you have it, not to give away stuff you don't have. I don't mean that. Right. But if you have it, you have to give it away to keep it. And so if I have privilege and I have knowledge and I have expertise, and yes, I need to make a living, and that's fair to myself. And I also need to find opportunities to give it away. And so this is really my offering. It's a way to bring, like I was saying before, bring conversations about mental health to this this piece of pop culture. And that's such an easier in. If you just go, I want to talk about mental health, it's not the same as let's talk about how mental health is shown in the musical Dear Evan Hansen, or let's talk about like what's going on with Alexander Hamilton, like why is he writing like he's running out of time, or let's talk about how how generational trauma impacts people's psychology in a show like The Color Purple, or how connecting with our common humanity matters to our sense of connection in a show like The Band's Visit. That's such an easier sell, because people are already passionate about mental health. About musicals, whereas it's more approachable, right? It's more approachable. So just hosting conversations. I've consulted with shows about their mental health content to help make sure the representations are accurate and are not causing harm and are but also fitting into what the story that they need to tell, right? Because it's not a documentary. Theater's not a documentary. Writing pieces to hopefully offer some insight into the art that we're consuming. I've been a presence at events like Broadway Con. I love doing that. Last year was not live, and it was still good, but like being there in person is so awesome. So I'm looking forward to July. It's an offering. It's just to give it away to keep it.
Yeah, I love that phrasing of that so very much too, and also just knowing that if your cup is empty, then you can't give from an empty cup. Just like a different way of phrasing that kind of thing. But I think it's something that that's why this whole thing exists, right? Which is like to serve, and it can't be from a place of selfishness. It has to be from just like, this is something and I have the capacity to give of myself or from others through whatever, and let me try to do that. So I feel that, and so thank you for doing that on behalf of the community. I'll speak up. I can only speak on behalf of myself, but on behalf of myself, because of the community. Thank you for what you've brought thus far. Well, let's get into it then. We'll talk broader, and then maybe we'll get more specific. In your practice thus far, or interacting with artists, over the various lives that you had done, or just generally, what have you been finding are some common, again, everybody's an individual, but common things or themes that you are feeling is impacting artists and humans at the moment in the mental health and wellness space? I feel like we all know the answer, but I just want to hear it from you.
So there's kind of I have two lanes of thought. One is that like kind of before the now, meaning like post-pandemic world. Not that the pandemic's over, but post like the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like there was life before and life after. Something that's very interesting, I think, about kind of the subset of individuals, of people who are theater actors, research has shown us that theater actors tend to be higher on measurements of empathy, right? So you can see, I think that's a pretty obvious kind of connection to how that is attractive, both attractive to people who to become actors, right? As a way to kind of try to like master that.
Yeah.
And also making folks more vulnerable. To taking it home, or to just absorbing so much just from the world in general, right? So then the pandemic happened, and the themes were absolutely like insecurity, right? Because the community's livelihood was just absolutely taken away.
Yeah.
I mean, like there was 0% going on for a time.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak on behalf of myself, like over 18 months, like it was a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, that's really stressful. Financial stress is a considerable stressor. And then also identity. Who am I if I'm not acting? Am I an actor? If I'm not an actor, what am I? Who am I?
Right.
Because that, especially with that grind and hustle mentality that's so necessary, from what I understand, to kind of making it, in the industry, the theater industry, that, like if you're not like always, auditioning and always work, doing a reading, or, doing this audition, audition, work, then who are you? And that was a theme that came up in a lot of the conversations.
Yeah. I've said this so much when I coach, and actually within EAC for a bunch of our cohorts, around this idea of identity, but you just said it so succinctly. But this idea that you are an artist, whether you are working or not. And I believe that in my core. I really do. It's just a part of who you are and the way in which you interact in the world. It's through a creative, artistic, empathetic lens. It just is what it is. And society, frankly, has taught us that your artist identity is defined by work, is defined by the roles that you get and the jobs that you book. And therefore this relationship that we have to the work, as in like the grind of the work rather than like the doing of the creating of the work, is such a vastly different way of understanding one's artistic identity. And how frustrating it is to really be, told from the outside world that that your artistry or your artist self is somehow diminished if you aren't doing the thing in what somebody else deems to be a quote unquote successful production, say, rather than like, oh no, I'm at home and I'm writing, or I'm at home and I'm meditating so that I can like be grounded as a human being for when the job shows up, and then I'm actually centered. I'm, creating with a friend. I'm simply like walking outside in nature and consuming the world around me so I can better tell stories about human behavior, right? Like all of those things are necessary to being an artist. And so this idea that our artistry is linked to our jobs, I feel that because it happened so abruptly and on such a drastic scale for so many of us in this industry during this time. And yet there is something really wonderful about now recognizing or really affirming how just because we lost the jobs for a solid chunk of time doesn't take away from the fact that I'm still an artist, very much in my core. But yes, the reckoning of that when it is all stripped away is traumatic and intense.
And then to also see reflected back, or to experience it reflected back from society, that there was such a lack of valuing the service that you provide as an actor, right? Because even on a legislative and state and city level, there was not really consideration given to what actors do and how that's different from other industries, and the fact that theater is the number one tourist destination in the city, in the city, which just boggled my mind. That, like, how can you, if you're a capitalist society,
Yeah.
how can you not value the thing that's bringing in the most tourist money?
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
Just Broadway. We're talking just Broadway alone, like
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar industry
And then
for
you're just
including
left
the
on your own.
restaurants and the tourism and everything
Yeah.
around it. Makes more money like on the bills than
Yeah.
sports do.
Yep.
Just like it is financially lucrative. And
Yeah.
the lack of any form of help and assistance. Truly, like a bunch of us
Yeah.
over the pandemic 2020, when we were sitting and doing nothing, were multiple times a week. We created a little solid group of us. We were calling senators across the country
Wow.
almost daily for pandemic relief for that exact reason. It's like, I don't understand conceptually, if we are living in a capitalist society,
Right.
this is, you are not assisting the thing that is making you money. Like, if we just forget even talk about the humans that it is affecting, like,
Right.
aren't you concerned about the fact that the money isn't coming in? Like, let's
Yeah.
help that happen for you, selfish person who wants the money.
Right. Even if we're speaking your language, like, this doesn't equate.
Correct. I'm not even talking about myself and my own personhood and how much it's traumatic for me. I'm talking about, let's make you money back. Let's make you some money back. Let's get some bills going through so that we can make you money. And that's still not working. And also, let's remember, what were people doing when they were sitting at home? They were consuming art. They were watching TV.
100%.
They were listening to musicals on their headphones. They were playing guitar. They were learning a new instrument. They were reading books. They were consuming poetry. Like, all of these things are art. And so the hypocrisy, frankly, I can go on about this forever, but like the hypocrisy around the fact that, like, what were people doing to get through the time was art. They were taking in, receiving, or giving and creating of art. So how is that not? Yeah.
I feel angry about that with you. And then we bring it to the human level. I think about, do we see performers as, I just watched that movie Nightmare Alley, Guillermo del Toro's new movie. It's a remake of a 1943 film, I think. Anyway, I love his stuff. They're so visually rich. And one of the kind of thematic pieces was this idea of a carnival geek. I never heard the term used that way, but I guess that's the origin of this term, geek, the word geek, was a person who was usually down on their luck. This is true, down on their luck, maybe an alcoholic or an addict. And the person who ran the carnival would say, well, I can give you a job, here, you need a drink. And they would lace it with opium and get them hooked. And then they would get the show. The carnival geek was somebody who would bite the head off a chicken.
Wait, what?
In front of an audience. And they would get them to act in these ways that was very dehumanizing and cruel.
This is the meaning of geek?
Yes. This is crazy. But this is what but I actually have a point about that. Believe it or not. And they would do this very dehumanizing act and an abusive act to the animal in front of an audience, a paying audience. And they would be, basically hooked. Now they'd be hooked on the drugs, and and this is the only way they could feed their habit.
Oh my God.
You got to do this thing. And I just think that's an extreme visual of what this is. But it's like, are we seeing performers as they're just to entertain us, or are performers doing a service? And this is really what I believe. I think performers, and tell me if you see it differently, are kind of like a rabbi. Like a rabbi is engaged in an act of service for the community. They're not up there and they're not up there just to serve us. And then, so what if it incapacitates them to their core?
Right.
They are doing something for the community, and the community needs to give back to them and hold them up, because they're doing something that we can't do, right? So you on that stage are moving us in ways. I think about a show like The Band's Visit, which is incredibly moving, to just connecting us to what makes us human, and in human connection, and that you're bringing us through that story in a way that I can't. Right. And like that it's not that, like, well, I paid you, so we're good. No, I have gratitude that you did that because I can't do this for myself. It's a mitzvah.
Yeah. Which for those listening is a good deed in Hebrew, or for Judaism. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, obviously, I believe deeply in that for both of those things that you discussed, but we're a vessel through which stories get told, or through which people can see their own human behavior, or to tell stories about humans. For me at least, that's the art that I am interested in telling, and the stories that I'm personally interested in telling. And I think also the art that speaks to my heart when I consume it are, yes, performers and artists who are up there as vulnerable as they possibly can be, showing a story so that I can then see myself reflected in them, or the world reflected through them, that I can then go back and reflect on my own life and my interactions around the world around me, and seeing how and if I need to adjust my own behavior accordingly to be more empathetic and to continue learning and growing as a person. So yeah, I would agree with you. That is the, in my mind, the ideal about artists. I think there are definitely some, we live in a capitalist society, so there is some art that is created that is perhaps a bit more on the consumer basis. And, who's to say that some people aren't drawn perhaps to the thing that is to make the paycheck, and then it is a little bit more of, I need to do this in order to just make this happen, rather than the integrity around it, which honestly, do what you need to do to survive in this world. Truly.
100%. Yeah.
If you need to take that job, do what you need to do for yourself. But at least the art that I want to be consuming, yes, I would agree with you that is my job, is to tell those stories as human.
Yeah, I wish audience members, I wish that people consuming that art, that we would just reframe how we think about what is what we're paying for.
Right.
Yeah. We're not paying. I just don't think of it as like, oh, I'm paying you to be entertained, like go dance. I'm thinking of like, I'm paying for my access to this act of service, to this ritual, and to the storytelling that matters, to me spiritually. And whether that's something that is more, just entertaining and connects me to my humanity because I'm laughing and smiling, or it's making me really think and ponder, and I'm, moved in different kind of ways. But I'm paying for the access and the expertise of this act of service.
I love that. I love that. So we're going to make this, this is just like, hey, y'all, take this phrasing and throw it to all your friends. Like, this is why you need to support theater, not because you think you're going to be entertained, but for this exact reason. That's so beautifully tied together in a little beautiful bow. And yes. Well, I guess my next question then is, veering a little bit off of theater as the art and more towards the human, mental health and wellness has so much validity, but it's also become a buzzword or a buzz phrase, I'd say, around like, well, are you taking care of your mental health and wellness? Right? How do you combat that? Let's start there.
Yes. Oof, it's so hard. It makes me think about like how companies have, will take advantage of, will capitalize on like Black History Month. It's like, well, what are you doing all the 11 months of the year to support anti-racism, to actively fight racism, or like Pride Month, like, you go into, a big box store in June now, and it's great. Like the visibility is great, but it's like, but you're making money off of queer blood, sweat, and tears. So it's hard, it's like this double-edged sword, because the awareness is great, right? Like the fact that the terminology or just the conversations are happening more is positive. But then there can be harm done by just, I think internally in companies, if they say, well, we really value self-care, but then they don't value it in the way, again, that that capitalism,
Right.
that, translating that into capitalist language. What are you doing to financially support your employees to engage in self-care? Because that is your currency in
Right.
a capitalist society. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you answered it. You did answer
Yes,
it.
I'm
You
just
answered
thinking
it.
I am, without going into it, just dealing with that myself at work, and really challenging that in my workplace. And um, because if you just say it and don't do anything to back it up, it's just lip service.
Right. Yeah. Well, then going a step further, how for those who are, say, newer into actually getting mental health assistance, resources,
Mhm.
unpacking in whatever capacity they need to, um, what are some things that you have found are wonderful beginning steps for those individuals
Mm,
who are like ready to go down that path for themselves?
yeah, I think uh, the thing that comes to mind right away is space, like creating space to be present with yourself,
Mhm.
because we tend to, and I know this is true with actors, because you have to hustle so much, is like we were saying earlier, like taking that time to pause and meditate, right? Or,
Mhm.
excuse me, to um to just be quiet for a few minutes in the morning, to connect with what are your values, what intentions do you have today. Again, these are like buzzwords, but like really they have meaning.
Mhm.
um what are you anxious about, what are you feeling right now? Because when we just go, um then we really deny ourselves connection with our emotions, and our emotions are information.
Right.
They are always information. I say this in the therapy room all the time, that emotions aren't good or bad.
Right.
We kind of think of like, oh, anger's bad and like happiness is good. No, they're all information. They might feel better or worse, but there are no such thing as good or bad emotions, and there is no such thing as right or wrong feelings.
Right.
Feelings just are, and they tell us stuff that we need to know. So we got to listen to them, and I think that's definitely something that the pandemic has really shown us, because
Mhm.
like especially at the beginning, we were forced to pause, and then this roller coaster of emotions came, right? And then this roller coaster of events came, and we were kind of forced to sit with ourselves in a way that we don't usually
Right.
in a capitalist society. And so the time, you could argue that time is money, but like the time is free, right? You don't have
Mhm.
to pay for that. And there are apps for meditation, because that's a practice, and so guidance is absolutely helpful with it. That's a great start.
Great. What about somebody who is wanting to
Mm,
find themselves a therapist in some capacity? I mean,
yeah.
obviously, there's many different schools of thought and therapists and
Mhm.
whatever. How does one go down the major rabbit hole of finding a therapist and or knowing what type of therapy one actually needs? I know this is like an overwhelming topic, so feel free to take this as you may.
Yeah, it's intimidating. Um, I think like getting anything with healthcare. I just went to like get an eye check for the first time in, maybe, I don't know, since I was a kid, and it was just like
Mm,
routine screening, because I'm like, oh, I'm 42, like probably should just like get my eyes checked, like eye strain with all the computer
yeah.
stuff. I was like, where do you even start? Right? And
Yeah.
this is like not that intimate. I mean, they
Yeah.
get really close to your face, but and therapy is really intimate, and so it's hard to know where to start. I mean, on a practical level, if you do have health insurance, finding somebody, who takes your health insurance is kind of a logistical start. But
Mhm.
the advice that I always give to people is, above and beyond any other factor, that goodness of fit between therapist and patient, or therapist and client, whatever terminology you prefer, um, is the greatest predictive factor of treatment outcome.
Mhm.
So the type of treatment you need, the theoretical model that you need, the years of experience, like None of that matters as much as feeling like you found somebody who clicks with you. And so it's okay to keep trying, and find somebody who fit, not somebody who tells you what you want to hear, but somebody who you click with,
right.
who you feel cares about you, and who makes it about you and not them. Good therapy is not boundary crossing and the person talking about themselves a lot. If I ever talk about myself in the therapy room, it's in service of the person I'm sitting with.
Right.
And that is very purposeful and thoughtful. Those are very purposeful and thoughtful moments. If you're sitting in a room with somebody who's talking a lot about themselves and you feel like they're taking up a lot of space, it's because they are.
Right. Do you have any questions that you recommend people ask when they are going through that beginning process of seeing if it's a good fit?
Are you licensed?
I would hope
It's a
so.
good screening question.
Is that real? Like, would people be like, I am a therapist and they're not?
Not licensed, sure. You can't be on insurance panels without being licensed.
I guess I just mean, like, are people gonna
Yeah.
say that they're therapists and then they're not licensed? Like, that's
Oh, absolutely.
I guess I say that out loud and I'm literally hearing myself say that and I'm like, of course they would, because this is the world we live in. So, wow, okay, that's a great one. What else?
Yes, if they're self-pay, they can absolutely, and they can be unlicensed. And of course, the intention of licensing boards are to protect the consumer, and mostly to that degree they do. So I think that's a good question to ask. And I think that's funny enough, I think it's okay to ask your therapist questions, but I just think that you got to get a feel for it, and like let them guide you in the process and see how you feel. To me, that's just like that. The over self-disclosure, the poor boundaries is just like a huge red flag.
Yeah.
To say no, thank you, and because it's not supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about them, right? When I'm the therapist in the room, it is not about me.
Right.
I'm a human in the room because my humanity is the tool that helps me help people heal. But that's the extent of kind of my space in the room. When I'm sitting on the couch, it's about me.
Right.
That's when when it's about me, no other time. So I just think that's just a big caution that I give to people, because sometimes I hear things and I'm like, oh God.
What about the fine line between somebody who's going to push you? I mean, not like give you advice and tell you to do things, but like somebody who's going to push you outside of the comfort zones and the way that you have been habitually thinking that might not be as like comfortable, versus somebody that you're like, I can kiki with them all day and I'm totally vibing, which might not necessarily get you out of old habits. What about that?
Yeah. So to that end, I think it's a great question to ask. How do you measure improvement? How do you check? How do you know if I'm getting better? And that answer to that question will tell you a lot. Some people will use objective measures to check on improvement and change. Some people will be sure to have a verbal understanding and agreement about what would be subjective measures of change. I think if you're not clear what change is being looked for by your therapist, that's not good. That's not good. You should know.
Yeah.
And you should agree. I guess now that you say that, that would probably be, I think, kind of the other kind of line of questioning that I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there, for those who say do have insurance, but also those who don't, are there particular resources? And if you don't have them offhand, then I could always just steal them from you and put them in the show notes. But do you have particular, like there's different apps that people find therapists on, or different institutions that have therapists on rosters? Like, are there certain organizations or companies or apps or whatever that you are like, these are actually really wonderful and you trust them?
Yeah, a few. One is just for a general search. If you're looking for, for a particular specialty, is actually Psychology Today has a really great search engine, and so you can look by specialty, and that's very, very helpful. And it's they have a huge database. Free therapy is very hard to find. There's just not a lot. of resources are at. There's like these tiny little pockets, and so I just don't know. I just don't know them because they're very local also. So, you know, that's a little tougher when we're talking, you know, people who need access to mental health services who can't, who don't have the financial means for it and don't have the health insurance or don't have the health insurance. And I will say this caution also to the trans community, who, you know, when looking for therapists, here's a little inside baseball piece of information. A lot of therapists will put that they specialize in gender identity and in LGBTQ issues, and they're trying to say, I am, you know, basically like they're not that they're even an active ally, but just like I'm okay with gay people, you know.
Oh God, yeah.
I think that's what they're trying to say, and there are other ways to say that, and it's just become really kind of the norm in the industry, unfortunately. Trying to do my best locally to change that, but for specifically for folks who are under the trans umbrella, ask this question of your therapist: if they have gender identity as a specialty, do you write letters for gender affirming medical care? If they don't, then they really don't specialize. If they don't feel comfortable with that and competent, and they don't do that regularly, then they're not the person for you.
Oh, I love that question to ask. Thank you for that. That's
And
we love inside baseball.
Yes, because you wouldn't know, because like it says it right there. Oh, this person specializes in gender identity. Trying to change that in my practice as well. Even just, you know, kind of inside the house. That's I think it's a very big disservice to people, because they will come and, you know, at some point need a letter of support for, you know, for example, like gender affirming top surgery, and then the therapist is like, well, I don't feel comfortable writing that letter. Now you've created another obstacle when there are already so many obstacles and so much gatekeeping. The other resource I could say is a little more specific, but one that I think is fantastic is the Darkness Rising Project.
Carlita,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Carlita's gonna be a guest on here.
Oh, fantastic! Yes. Oh, so listen to that episode because you'll hear all about it. But it's a network, or a way to connect. They will connect you with a Black therapist. And I think as a clinician, in addition to just as a human and as a Jew, but, you know, certainly as a clinician, that being concerned about and caring about and doing something about the impact of the generational trauma that we have caused to our Black siblings is part and parcel, or is just absolutely consistent with what it means to be a therapist, right? Because we have caused so much trauma and harm, and, you know, she is creating, you know, this really great resource, and I love what she's doing.
Yeah, no, she's also been with the AC forever, and she's literally brilliant. Darkness Rising Project, y'all. But we're gonna have an episode about that too. So oh no, we're on it. Trust me. I guess my as we wrap our time, is there anything that you feel? I have like one more question, but is there anything specifically that you feel is like on your heart about these topics that we've thus far talked about that you wanted to share?
You know, the thing that just has been really present for me recently, and I mean like past couple of years, has been listening. I feel like sometimes, especially as allies, not as the people who have been harmed, but as allies, that we yell down at people who don't yet understand how they're not there yet, right? They use the wrong language, or they ask a question that is naive, and we yell at them as like a show of our knowledge. And like we've all done it, you know, but then that we have just closed that person's ears. Again, especially as allies, I do not fault anybody who has been harmed for being angry and expressing that anger. As allies, How do we invite people in? Because again, being concerned about the mental health of our entire community really matters, and if we're saying, well, I care that, my Black siblings over here are, continuing to be harmed and traumatized by systemic racism, and I'm going to yell at this, this fellow white person for not understanding, when it really helps more to speak up and to invite in, to help the cause. We don't have a right to that anger. That doesn't belong to us. Let people say it in a way that people can hear you, so that they can come along. Yeah, that is on my heart and mind a lot recently.
Yeah, especially now that it's a buzz phrase, but like a cancel culture is so amongst us. Of we close somebody off as opposed to inviting them in for conversation and education and conversation around things that we all could probably learn more about.
Yeah. And I was not that naive once too.
Oh yeah.
Right. And if I'd only been yelled down at, it would be very hard to open my ears.
Right.
People have invited me in, so I need to extend that grace to somebody else. And cancel culture, right? Like if somebody is what's the term? If they are unapologetic,
right,
and they are actively causing harm, and they are malicious, I'm okay with not buying a Harry Potter book because J.K. Rowling is a TERF. I am absolutely okay with that. Now, if somebody that I know misgenders somebody, I'm not going to cancel them. I'm going to speak up with my trans siblings and say that you might not have been aware, but that person's pronouns are they, them. Invite in, right? That's so different to me. It's like we've just created this blunt instrument, that is just, you only need the hammer when I think, this is just what I think. You only need the hammer when in few circumstances. J.K. Rowling used the hammer, other people, I think we have to use gentler tools.
Yeah. I guess for anybody listening, where can people find you or communicate with you in respectful, kind, boundary-full spaces? What is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
You can definitely, my DMs are open. Instagram, I'm at the Dr Drama, so THEDRDRAMA. Same on Twitter. And also my website, drdrama.com. I have a way to email me on there. And I always respond. I will always respond. I mean, I guess unless somebody was just coming at me with hatred, I wouldn't, but that usually doesn't happen. And if people need help connecting to resources, I will do the best I can to share that. Like I said, got to give it away to keep it.
Yeah. Well, y'all, Dr. Hurwitz is in your circle of support, and she means it when she says it. So I'm so grateful that you, this topic is hard and heavy and overwhelming and all of those feelings. And so I'm so grateful that you are so open to talking about it in this capacity and have shared such wonderful resources and ways to think about it and such beautiful language around it that I know I'm going to listen back to this and be like, I'm taking that for myself. Thank you. So truly thank you for your time, and thank you for always being so willing to be included in the work that we're doing with EAC.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for asking me. This was a super easy yes, as I said to you.
Oh, thank you.